Hello world, and welcome to Coding After Effects Back to Basics. And in this tutorial I want to talk about the frameDuration method. And what the frameDuration method does is it returns a number value of the duration of a frame in seconds. So what I want to do with that is I want to get the frame rate, I want to get the frame count, and I also want to reset the frame count for each second that I get to. The first thing I want to show you is the expression that makes up frame duration, so you have a better understanding on how frame duration works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to source text and I'm going to write 1 divided by 24. And if you can imagine, 1 for this example is going to represent 1 second, and this 24 is representing our composition frame rate. So if I divide 1 by 24, we get this huge even number over here. And I want you to kind of etch that number in your memory a little bit. So if I get rid of that and go back to my default text, which is print, and go back inside the editor and write this comp dot frame duration, and return it, I get the same number that you've seen before. And that's because that's basically what frame duration is it dividing the second with the composition current frame rate. So I also want to show you one more thing before we get deeper into the lesson. If I was to multiply frame duration by the frame rate, then we get 1. We're getting back 1 second again. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn frame duration into a variable called FD. So this way I don't have to keep on writing this long code. So next, what I want to do is I want to get the frame rate. So I'm going to put var frame rate equals 1 divided by FD. And if I return frame rate, voila, we got 24. And one of the reasons I was just showing you that example earlier when we got 1 is to give you a better understanding what's going on with this frame rate variable. If I'm able to get 1 by multiplying frame rate by 24, then if I was to actually divide 1 by by frame duration, then I should get 24 back, since I'm basically just changing 1 from one side of the equation to the other. So now that we got that, the next thing I want to do is I want to get the frame count. And this is basically just going to tell us what frame that we're at in our current composition. So if I put in time divided by FD, and before I actually show off this variable, I just want to go over how the time method go a little bit in a little bit more details. I'm pretty sure most of you know how the time method works, but let me kind of go under the hood like I did with frame duration. So if I type in time, of course we get this, what seems to be some type of random number kind of indicating our time, but there's a expression that makes up time that is going to make a lot of sense today. So if I take my time indicator, of course, go back to 0, we're going to get 0. But if I move it up 1, we get this very familiar number that we seen earlier. And of course, this is the frame duration number that we had before for frame duration. So what time is essentially doing is it's multiplying the frame duration by whatever frame that you're at. So if I was to go to the second frame right here, you see that we get double the amount that we had. And of course, if I was to go to 3, this is triple, and 4 is quadruple. And to prove this, let me just get rid of time at the last line and put FD times 4. And you see we get the same number back. So this is basically the time method, multiplying the frame duration by whatever frame that you're at. So if we're looking at frame count, we're dividing time by the frame duration. And to make sense of this, let's say if I was at the very first frame of our composition, not 0, but frame 1, time is going to have the same number or the same value as frame duration. So if you divide a number with the same number, then you're going to get 1. If I was to go to the second frame, which time is double the frame duration, if you divide the frame duration by that number, then you're going to get 2. And this is basically how this expression is working. I'm just basically dividing and getting back a whole number by reversing time, by dividing time with the frame duration. So if I put in frame count, and since we're at the 4th frame, then we should get 4. But I want to do one more thing before I close this tutorial, and that is if I was to go to the very first second, I get 24. But what if I wanted this to reset? What if I wanted this to turn to 0 once I hit the first frame, and then, the first second, and if I was to go beyond that first second, it will start counting again until I get to the next second, which it will reset itself back to 0. Well, I can do that. And the way to do this is I'm going to use a operator that's not really common in everyday math, which is the modulus. So if I put frame count modulus frame rate, and I push enter in the number pad, since I'm at the very first second, it's giving me 0. So modulus is doing is dividing frame count by frame rate, which frame count is 24, the frame rate is 24, and it's going to give us 1. But it's not really looking for the 1, it's looking for the remainder. And since there is no remainder left after you divide 24 by 24, you're going to get 0. So if I was to move this up 1, the frame count is now at 25, and it's being divided by the frame rate, which is 24. Since it doesn't go in there evenly, we get a remainder, and that remainder is 1, since we have 1 left. So if I was to go up 2, again, same thing, 26 divided by 24, you get 1 with the remainder of 2. And that's basically what's going on with this. So if I was to actually take this time indicator all the way to the second, we get 0 again. If you go before 1 second, then it's still going to do the same thing. So if you divide 0 by whatever frame, then you're going to get 0. But you're still going to have a remainder of whatever frame count that you're currently at. So that's basically it for the frame duration. And one of the plus sides of actually writing frame duration is if you was to change the frame rate, or if you was to use this in a different composition, frame duration is going to automatically update your code. So this way your code is not going to break, nor do you have to go back in and readjust your code for a new composition or a new frame rate. And that's basically it. I hope you learned something from this tutorial. And if you like it, go check out my other videos. Until the next time, peace out, world.